That is the big question, given that he has said in the past that Belgium, the country he's now prime minister of, quote, has no future. This is a big, shocking development. When I moved to Belgium 15 years ago, if I had told someone that someday Bart de Wever was going to be prime minister of this country, they wouldn't have believed me. And that's because as the bylaws of his party, the New Flemish Alliance, they say Belgium should not exist. They want independence for Flanders. What changed, though, that enabled this is not so much anything to do with his party, but things to do with other parties. For one thing, the rise of the ultra-far-right Vlaams Belang Flemish separatist party, which made the NVA look more moderate by comparison. The other development, as was mentioned in the package, is the fall of the Socialist Party in Wallonia, the southern French-speaking region, which had been dominant in Wallonia for so many years, but it was kicked out of power by the reformist movement, MR. Now, that is still nominally part of the Liberal family, but really the new leader as of a couple years ago, Georges-Louis Boucher, has dragged the party so far to the right with a anti-immigration platform that it made this partnership possible. Essentially, what's happened here is the right-wing parties in both the Dutch-speaking part and the French-speaking part have put aside their differences with one another to bond over their shared dislike of immigrants. The big question is whether that can hold, because the language division here in Belgium, as people know, is extremely sensitive and extremely fraught. And the question is whether this can work. This was kind of a shotgun wedding. The reason they formed the government that came to the deal on Friday night is because the king, Belgian King Philippe, had set Friday as the deadline, that if they didn't come to an agreement over a government, he would call new elections. So I think the big question right now is whether de Wever, with his inflammatory comments about French speakers in the past, with his stated on-paper desire for Flemish separatism, even if the NVA really is working more toward confederalism, whether the Francophones in the governing party will be able to put up with that for a very long time.
So assuming Belgium can keep it together, if you will, Dave, this has implications for the whole of the bloc, because it's yet another member that's tilting to the right. We heard de Wever call out what he calls the EU's regulatory fervor. Harks back to some of the language used by the president of the European Commission last week when she unveiled her blueprint for the next 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. De Wever's first act, so he was sworn in this morning by the king, and then he came immediately from the royal palace here to the Eggmont Palace, where there's this informal summit of EU prime ministers and presidents happening. Actually, this building is not an EU building. It's a Belgian government-owned building, so in a way, the rest of the leaders are de Wever's guests today in this building. But everyone's keenly watching him because he is allied with Italy's far-right prime minister, Giorgia Meloni, in their European grouping in the European Parliament, the ECR. And so all of this kind of anti-EU talk, it's actually fairly new for the NVA party. They didn't used to be very Eurosceptic, but this came about 6 years ago when they first started flirting with it. They joined the ECR. And the question is he going to be a leader in the mold of Meloni? So more on the hard right, but having kind of pro-EU stances when it comes to Ukraine, this type of thing that lets him be part of the fold? Or will he be more like other parties in the ECR, which are more far right? I should say here in Belgium, the NVA is considered a center-right, hard-right party. In Belgium, they're not really considered far-right like, let's say, Brothers of Italy is in Italy.
Dave Keating, many thanks for the terminology there. Dave Keating reporting from that informal EU leaders retreat taking place in